Tonight, after the big SDLP Westminster victories of 2019, the voters appear to have deserted the party. Can Colm Eastwood find a way to win them back? We'll have live reaction and analysis of the interview, along with the latest campaign news, including the acceptance by Gavin Robinson that the DUP oversold the deal to return to Stormont. How will the DUP voters the party is desperate to keep react to that? The Foyle and West Belfast constituencies delivered for the SDLP 5 years ago, but will the party struggle to hold the seats in 5 weeks' time? Colm Eastwood has led his party since 2015 and was, of course, one of those two SDLP MPs in the outgoing Parliament. And Mr Eastwood is with me now. Welcome to the programme. Thanks for joining us tonight. Since the last Westminster election in 2019, the direction of travel for your party has been one way, and that's downwards. Are there any reasons for you to be cheerful going into this election?
I'm actually very excited about this election. We've had 14 years of the Tory party wrecking the place. And if you look at our public services, our health service, community groups, Brexit, all of the things that the Tories have done, including the Legacy Act, including destroying the relationship with the Irish government, I think people should be excited actually now about the chance that we might finally get rid of this crowd from Downing Street. And I think this is a big opportunity actually here to reset those relationships between London and Dublin and build back our peace process. But I suppose our view is you've got to be there to do that. OK, well, we'll come on to what may or may not happen as far as getting rid of the Tories, as you put it, is concerned. At your leadership launch back in 2015, you said you were running because you were fed up losing. Now, if we look at the past few years under your leadership, in 2022, you lost a third of your MLAs, the party's worst ever Stormont result. You lost your deputy leader, a sitting minister, and your party's right to sit in the executive. In 2023, you lost a third of your councillors, your worst ever local election result. This year, you lost more councillors due to internal disputes, and you even managed to lose one of your 8 MLAs. You must be really fed up now. No, I'm actually very excited. The party has gone through a process of renewal. We're bringing lots of new people in. Let's be honest, we had a couple of bad elections. We absolutely did. It was an impossible context. And I think every commentator and pundit worth their salt understood there was a huge push to make sure that Michelle O'Neill got to be First Minister, which was the right thing because she was elected to be First Minister and denied that opportunity by Jeffrey Donaldson and the DUP. So, of course, the electorate were going to respond to that. But this is an opportunity now in this election to send people back to Westminster who I think, if you look at Claire Hanna and you look at myself, what we've done in Westminster over the last 4.5 odd years has been really stand up, fight the Tories, look them in the eye and tell them we're not going to take it anymore. Because you remember, Mark, between 2017 and 2019, the only people speaking for us in Northern Ireland were the DUP. People don't want to go back to that. They don't want to lose their voice. And I am very confident, having been round the doors over the last week, not expecting to be in the middle of an election campaign this quickly, but being round the doors and speaking to people in my own constituency, people understand that message. They don't want to be left without a voice. They want people to go there, look at the whites of the eyes of the Tory government, if we have a Tory government, and hold them to account. Or if we have a Labour government, to use the influence that we have, which is very significant influence, to make sure that they deliver for Northern Ireland.
And we see pictures of you apparently holding the Tories to account in a House of Commons chamber, which is frankly mostly empty. And you didn't stop Boris Johnson, which you promised to do at the last Westminster election, and you didn't stop Brexit.
You sound like a Twitter troll now, Mark. I think what we were saying at that time was we want to be part of a coalition of progressive parties to get rid of Boris Johnson and to stop Brexit. Now, we did our part here. Voters in Scotland did their bit in Scotland. But unfortunately, the people of England voted the Tory party back in, and we've seen the chaos that has ensued since. That's why so much work had to go into correcting the Brexit madness. And of course, if we go back to a situation where the only people in Westminster representing people in the north of Ireland are the DUP, we'll have more chaos because we've already seen tonight and last night that Gavin Robinson, the new leader of the DUP, wants to take them out and wants to begin to move away from the agreements.
Be honest, you had little or no impact in the House of Commons. In Westminster generally, whenever you were there and the Tories were in charge, had the whip hand and were delivering Brexit and the chaos that went with it, as you might see it. The point is, the Tories may well not win this election if the polls are to be believed, and you'll still have little or no influence over the next Labour government if that is what voters decide the UK is going to have.
Well, I think sitting outside or turning up now and again and standing outside doing interviews makes no impact whatsoever. But being there, we have built up seriously strong relationships with the British government, the new British government, I hope, who's going to be a Labour government, and I want Northern Ireland's voice to be heard. Now, what happened in 2017 to 19, the chaos that we've just talked about, was delivered by the DUP because they held the whip hand and we ended up having to undo all that madness over the past Parliament. The bottom line is this: it's better to be there, holding up to account, standing up, having our voice heard.
But here's
and I
the
think
problem.
people, Mark, I think people get that. Okay. People are telling me before
what influence will you have if there is a Labour government? Are you going to be able to persuade Hilary Benn to open the money taps in the Treasury if he's the new Secretary of State?
He's not going to be Chancellor.
He's already no, but I mean he may have some influence as far as Northern Ireland's finances, public finances are concerned. But he's already made it very clear, sitting in that very seat in this studio, that it's not going to be a huge change as far as public finances are concerned if there's a Labour government in place.
Anybody watching the news will know that the Tory party have absolutely decimated and destroyed the public finances, and it's going to take a long time to fix that, but I think it would be better. And by the way, we have lots of disagreements with this Labour party. I've been in different lobbies than them many times. I'm actually very frustrated by how long it's taken them to get to the position on Gaza, but I was there from day one, standing up to the British Prime Minister, telling them to stop sending weapons of war to bomb, to allow the Israeli government to bomb and murder and create a genocide on the people of Gaza.
Let's stay with finances for a moment or two more.
But the point is, we are very influential. We've lots of friends. We've lots of support.
Very influential. You've got two MPs, or you had two MPs out of 650.
Yeah, and I think people will recognise that when we are there, our voice is loud, our voice is heard, much bigger than having two MPs. The bottom line is, the people who don't go don't have any influence, don't have any impact, don't even get noticed.
Well, it's not about what Sinn Féin don't do, it's what...
Well, would you ask me what we're going to do?
It's about what capacity the SDLP actually has with two MPs, and you may or may not go back with two MPs after July the 4th. Our business and economics editor, John Campbell's been reporting from sentiment from within the Treasury, let's say, that effectively, no matter who the next Chancellor is, what the Treasury seems to expect to happen is that revenue raising is going to prove to be essential. And that has been echoed by Sir Robert Choate, the chair of the Northern Ireland Fiscal Council, who says any sensible government, including presumably our executive, should be considering revenue raising as an option. You're not going to talk about that very much during this election campaign, are you, if you're knocking the doors?
Well, of course, the executive, who we're not part of, we're in opposition, and we're spending a lot of time, I think, holding this executive to account in a very... we're not standing in the ditches, hurling stones at them, but we're holding them to account. We've asked the executive for a plan. We've asked them to come up with a programme for government. Funny, there's no programme for government in time for this election.
We're talking about the Treasury here. We're not talking about the executive, and we're talking about what the SDLP plan would be and whether or not, yes, you're in opposition in Northern Ireland, not because you want to be in opposition, but because people decided that's where you would be. You're not entitled to a seat at the table. Revenue raising could be part of the solution. You could be telling the people who do control the purse strings in Northern Ireland that that's the case, but we're not doing that.
We don't know what we're doing.
What are you doing?
We'll be very clear.
You're in a position to tell me. What's your position on revenue raising?
We'll be very clear with the incoming British government. Hopefully it won't be a Tory government. We'll be very clear with them that the basis on which the Northern Ireland Executive is funded is absolutely wrong. It should be on the basis of need. By the way, we've been saying this for 10 or 15 years when other parties weren't supporting it. But, there was a negotiation on behalf of the executive parties and between the executive parties and the British government before they went back in to storm it.
But the
Why did they not nail this down then?
Well, that's a separate issue. That's not what we're talking about at the moment.
Not the point,
you say that you've got influence with the Labour Party and that you may well have influence with the Treasury on the other side of this election.
Party.
Yeah, but the point is, it may well be that the view from Treasury is that revenue raising has to be part of the equation.
Well,
where will the SDLP be?
You're looking into a crystal ball and trying to tell us what the Treasury is going to say. I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen around
John
it.
John Campbell's reporting that is the sentiment within the Treasury.
Well, the election hasn't even happened. What we do know is that the Tory party have wrecked the place.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. That's not about the politicians. Hang on, just to be clear for the benefit of people at home, that's not about the politicians in the Treasury. That's about the sentiment in terms of the mandarins who run the Treasury.
I understand that.
Yeah, no, but just in case people at home don't understand.
But actually what happens in an election is the public go out, they get to cast their ballots, they elect a government, and the government get to make those choices. Am I full of hope that this incoming Labour government are going to open up the taps? I'm absolutely not, and people have to be honest about that. But what I am telling you
What's
is
the plan then?
the people of Northern Ireland will have a voice in Westminster. We will have 2, possibly 3 MPs if they're elected. But we're not going to pretend that we're going to be running the next British government. That's not what we're there to do.
But you're making big claims for the influence you have, and my point is that with 2 MPs... Well, you're making big claims for the voice that the SDLP has. I'm saying that with 2 MPs out of 650 for the past 4.5 years, your voice was a small voice in the wilderness on occasion.
That is not the case. I think when you look at what happened around the Legacy Act, around the Brexit negotiations, remember, between 17 and 19, all we had was Jeffrey Donaldson and Nigel Dodge speaking for the people of Northern Ireland, and people were fed up with that. That's why they voted for us in big numbers. The question is, do we leave them at it again? When we have the leader of the DUP telling us over the past 2 days that they're beginning to move away from the international agreement that they signed up to. Can we leave them at it again on their own in Westminster? I think that would be a very dangerous move for the people of Northern Ireland who don't support the DUP, who don't support Brexit, which of course is the vast majority of us.
OK, let's bring it back to this election. And is it the case that your party's going to be fighting in each and every of the 18 constituencies in Northern Ireland?
Yes, obviously we're running in 18 constituencies. We will focus our resources in a number of those constituencies where we think we can be competitive. But we do have places, obviously, as you know, as you pointed out at the beginning, we had a couple of difficult elections. So there's places we have to begin to build back over the long term. Yeah. But we will be focusing on places where we can win, and that's
so that's effectively 2 constituencies, because you need to hold on to those 2 seats, don't you?
I wouldn't just rule out other constituencies as well. But yes,
for example,
we have 2 constituencies
where do you fancy your chances apart from those 2? South Belfast, Foyle, and
we have 2 constituencies where we're defending. There'll be close elections, but we have a lot of support on the ground, and I think we'll have plenty of support when it comes to election day.
Well, what are you doing for Fermanagh South Tyrone? What do you do there? Do you have a paper candidate in Fermanagh South?
There's no such thing as a paper candidate.
Well, there is such a thing as a paper candidate. Of course there is.
Well, you're saying that. I'm the leader of the party. We're not running paper candidates, but we are focusing our energies and our resources, like every political party will do in this election, on the places where we think we can win or we can be competitive.
So let me ask you about this. Earlier today, Sinn Féin confirmed that the party wouldn't run candidates in 4 constituencies. One of those is South Belfast and Mid-Down. Some people are already interpreting that as Sinn Féin encouraging its supporters to lend the SDLP candidates their votes in South Belfast. Would you encourage your voters to reciprocate in other areas, maybe in places like Fermanagh South Tyrone, North Belfast, maybe even Upper Bann?
Well, look, I think what Sinn Féin did today shows that Sinn Féin get that this is a very important election, that the opportunity to get rid of the Tory party from government in Westminster would be good for all of us, be good for those of us who rely on public services, good for community organisations, good for the economy, because they wrecked it. But my view actually is the best message to send in this election is to send people who won't just be giving a message, they'll actually go and vote against the Tory party, hold the Labour Party's feet to the fire on the promises that they've made to Northern Ireland. That's the best thing that people could do. So in constituencies where we're competitive, I would hope that people would make that choice. People, by the way, who don't always vote for us.
Yeah.
You know, whenever
you didn't manage to hold the Tories' feet to the fire over the past 4.5 years, you're hardly likely to be able to hold.
You're going to say that to Keir Starmer?
Well, I mean, I'm not talking to Keir Starmer, but if Keir Starmer has a whopping great big majority, as some people think he will have on the 5th of July, you're going to be in no position, if you manage to go back with 2 MPs, to hold his feet to the fire under those circumstances. I mean, you've got to be realistic.
I am trying to explain to you, Mark, we're not pretending that we're going to be running the British government. We've no interest in running the British government. We are doing...
But you are saying you'll have significant influence.
Well, we have strong relationships and strong influence with the British Labour Party. We are not the British Labour Party. I've been at loggerheads with the British Labour Party, particularly over issues like gas, and I imagine there'll be lots more issues as they get into government. But the difference is our voice will be heard. We will not be silenced. We will not be silenced
We'll
by
see
the
if it'll be
DUP
heard.
and others.
I mean,
Well,
you
very
can
cynical,
certainly
Mark.
speak up, and you can speak in the House of Commons if you're returned as an MP, and you can send out tweets. Whether or not anybody in the Labour Party
interesting way of looking at
listens,
democracy. I think it's a very
whether or not anybody listens in government is a completely separate
It's a very
issue.
strange way of looking at democracy. If you're not going to be the government, you shouldn't turn up. Are we saying that to Mary Lou McDonald in the South?
Turn up.
Are we saying that to political parties who aren't
how
running?
much influence you would actually have under those circumstances.
I'm not overstating our
Foyle,
influence. What I'm
right, let's talk about Foyle specifically, because you are going to, if you're going to hold on to that seat, you're going to be looking for votes presumably across the board. I wonder what you say in response to recent comments on the Belfast Telegraph podcast by the former DUP Special Advisor Lee Reynolds, who said, let me just quote, "Colin will now run himself around all the unionist areas in Foyle trying to get support after basically being more abusive to your average unionists than Sinn Féin have been over the past 4 years." Are you worried that a lot of unionists in your constituency might just agree with him?
Well, first of all, Mark, I got votes from everywhere, from people who don't vote for the SDLP, people who don't share my constitutional position. So did Claire Hanna, and I expect to get them again. I don't actually have a clue what Lee Reynolds is talking about. I think I've been more than respectful. In fact, when I set up the New Ireland Commission, what we have done over the past number of years is have thousands of conversations with people from different backgrounds to show the kind of New Ireland that we want to build. And in fact, in Foyle, no, let me just finish.
We're nearly out of time.
In Foyle, when the SDLP was running the council, every single time you had a unionist mayor. The first time we don't have a unionist mayor is when Sinn Féin run the council. I think that's a retrograde step, but it didn't happen under my
Right,
watch.
one quick last question, and it's about party policy. 14 months ago in March last year, your party began boycotting the Stephen Nolan show on Radio Ulster over what you saw as the unfair treatment of Matthew O'Toole. No SDLP representative appeared on air since then, denying your representatives valuable airtime during a pretty tricky council election campaign. Yet within hours of the general election being called, you abandoned that boycott and appeared on the programme. Why did you so quickly drop your
Very dramatic language.
That's what happened.
We have been in conversation with the BBC over the last number of months.
Very convenient timing.
We were coming to a conclusion anyway, but am I going to deny the SDLP access to one of the biggest shows in the country, as it keeps telling us?
You denied all your council candidates access during that campaign.
Because we were in a dispute with the BBC. We have made our point.
Resolved that dispute.
We have made our point. They know what we think, and I hope that the Nolan show will respond in the way that we'd like them to.
And did you discuss that with senior members of your team before you unilaterally went on?
What do you mean unilaterally?
Well, before you went on, before you broke that boycott and went on.
The SDLP made a decision and we went back on, yeah.
OK, and can we now expect people like Matthew O'Toole, the leader of the opposition at Stormont, to be back on the airwaves on that programme?
Well, we'll see, but I mean, I've been on, I'm the leader of the party, others have been on, and Colin McGrath was on the other day.
Yeah.
I mean, look...
can we expect the leader of the SDLP opposition to be on the airwaves?
We never said we were in this never-ending boycott. We had a dispute with the Nolan show. We've made our point, we've made our cases. We hope things change, but we're not going to deny people access to the arguments that we're making, and I think that's just normal politics.
Right, we need to leave it there. We are out of time. Appreciate your time, Colin Eastwood. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Throughout the campaign, I'll be interviewing all the leaders across the View and Sunday Politics, but for their reaction to what the SDLP has been saying, and the big stories so far, including the latest from within the DUP, I'm joined by the political editor of the Belfast Telegraph, Suzanne Breen, and the deputy editor of Slugger O'Toole, Dr. David McCann. So welcome to both of you. I want to just start off with what Colin Eastwood's been saying. What about that claim, Suzanne, first of all, that the SDLP has and will continue to have, if it returns MPs on July the 4th, significant influence in Westminster?
Well, I think this is going to be a more difficult argument to make in this election than it was in 2019. It is still possible for the SDLP to argue that it's obviously Labour's sister party, that it is important that it's here, but I don't think that argument is as powerful. What I also noted is effectively the limited ambitions of the SDLP going into this election. It really is about holding on to its 2 seats. I think Claire Hanna, even with Sinn Féin running, would have been pretty solid and safe in South Belfast. I think Colin is probably still the favourite, but he will take a hit. His majority will not be the whopping big one that it was in 2019.
What do you make of what Colin Eastwood has had to say about those seats and about where today's decision by Sinn Féin about not running candidates in South Belfast, East Belfast, Lagan Valley and North Down feeds into that element of this conversation?
Well, I think Sinn Féin not running in South Belfast, but I think it took a lot of people by surprise, but that unequivocally it helps Cara Hanna. I agree with Suzanne. Look, she was always the favourite going into this. The SDLP, even before today, would have privately told you they were pretty confident about that. I think what Sinn Féin take away from Alliance in South Belfast, they actually hand back in North Down and in Lagan Valley and in East Belfast as well, because that means that that progressive vote isn't being as chipped away in those areas. So yes, benefits Alliance in 3 constituencies, but unequivocally the SDLP in South Belfast.
Some of what Colm Eastwood was saying at the beginning sounded a bit like that line from the Ulster Unionist Party a number of years ago, that that the Ulster Unionists would shrink to grow. Did that strike you, Suzanne?
Yes, it did. Look, I remember conversations with SDLP people maybe a year ago in which there was a lot of talk of potentially winning South Down, and there was a name of someone that's outside the party, a very high-profile figure. Their name was mentioned to me. They would possibly join the SDLP and they could take that seat from Chris Hazard. There is absolutely no hope of that happening at all now. I think
Some people think it is possible under certain circumstances. If there's a perfect storm, it is possible that the SDLP could
Look,
win.
I can't say it, and you gave Colm the perfect opportunity to actually name constituencies in which he thought the SDLP would win seats. New seats, like we know Sinn Féin is going in. Foyle is obviously a target seat possible, but outside chances, for example, in Upper Bann and East Derry, we can't say the same of the SDLP, and that reflects its more limited ambitions.
And Sinn Féin is announcing big-name candidates, of course, in Fermanagh South Tyrone, like Pat Cullen.
Yeah, I mean, it was an absolute masterstroke by Sinn Féin. Again, Pat Cullen, a big part of Sinn Féin's message is about sending a message to the Conservatives. Again, Pat Cullen has been doing that for years. She's very well placed in her role in the RCN to have done that. So, yeah, she's a very strong pick.
OK, let's move on to talk about that reset, as many people have described it, within unionism, particularly within the DUP, on the part of the new confirmed leader of the party, Gavin Robinson, last night. What was he doing, Suzanne?
I think he was trying to unite the party, and from those who were there at that gathering, they said that the atmosphere was electric, and there genuinely did seem to be unity between people who were on different sides of the divide on the deal. But the danger for Gavin Robinson here is that he hands Jim Allister ammunition. He can point and say, you're stealing our clothes. He also potentially hands the Alliance Party ammunition during this election. It can say the DUP is moving to the right, and we know that DUP voters in the past have jumped, they've leapfrogged over the Ulster Unionist Party and they've gone to Alliance. But this gamble may also work for Gavin Robinson, and very conveniently the man that they can blame for all the overselling of the deal, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, is nowhere to be seen, and he can't argue his case. He's a scapegoat.
Yeah, but I suppose the point that the DUP's opponents will make, David, is that Gavin Robinson was standing there shoulder to shoulder with Sir Geoffrey Donaldson during those negotiations, and when that overselling, if that's what it was actually happening.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Alliance have already been out of the traps today, reminding people of that as well. Look, Gavin can't walk away from the fact that he was deputy leader when this was happening. He was key in these negotiations. But I fundamentally agree with Suzanne. I think this is about bridging the gap between someone like Gavin Robinson and someone like Sammy Wilson and creating a more united front. But it does create some traction for the Ulster Unionists in places like South Antrim. It creates a bit of traction for the TUV and also the Alliance Party in some of those key constituencies.
Yeah, what about the TUV? Because the party, we're told, will make it clear tomorrow exactly how many candidates it's running, who they are and where they'll be running. What are you expecting when we get that clarity tomorrow, Suzanne?
Well, the TUV's big reveal comes tomorrow. I'm told that the party will be running a double-digit number of candidates. There's some constituencies that it's not contesting, but in the constituencies that it is running, it won't be running paper candidates. This won't be a paper campaign. It will be going at the Westminster election campaign, hell for leather. I'm told that the party is standing in North Belfast. Obviously, Philip Brett of the DUP will be trying to win that seat back from John Finucane. I'm told that it's also running in East Belfast, where Gavin Robinson will face a very tough fight. And it's indicated to me that it also is likely to run in Lagan Valley. I understand that representations have been made to Jim Allister to say, look, Johnny Buckley is a really good guy. He opposed this deal. Can you pull back? But at the moment, as we speak tonight, that the TUV leader is not minded to withdraw his candidate, the person that has been selected to fight in Lagan Valley.
What do you make of that? And does it seem to you, David, that there is a clear single strategy on the part of the DUP if what Suzanne says proves to be correct? Because some people say the TV's trying to ride two horses here.
Yeah, because they're going to have to fight a hell of a rearguard action in East Belfast. Apologies, because again, 2010, the TV vote was critical. Also, now that Sinn Féin have pulled out of Lagan Valley, it does open up a bit more of a pathway for Source Eastwood. If that unionist vote is split and that type of swing that happened in 2019 happens again, that's going to be key. And the other big thing would be the TV running in North Belfast would mean that John Finucane, apart from having a comfortable victory, which we would expect, would have a much bigger win, and that would be another big dent to unionism and the DUP overall.
Okay, interesting stuff. And we still have 5 weeks to go. David, Suzanne, thanks both very much indeed. Let's get some unionist reaction now to Gavin Robinson's apparent reset from the former DUP Special Advisor, David Graham, and the former Loyalist politician, Davy Adams. And we'll also be talking to both of you on that ongoing debate about the degree to which unionism is engaging or should be engaging in the United Ireland debate, which of course is what we originally invited you in to talk about. So you're both very welcome, and thanks very much indeed for joining us. David Graham, first of all, let's start with the situation in the DUP, because it's been dominating the news agenda for the past 24 hours. Is Gavin Robinson, in your view, as a former senior figure within the DUP, playing his hand well?
I think, Mark, that certainly the speech that Gavin made last night on the whole was a good speech. I think the drawback, of course, is that is the speech that, in my view, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson should have been making in January. Or at the very least, it was the speech that Gavin should have made when he was taking over the interim leadership in April. So there's a level of contrition. I mean, this morning on the Stephen Nolan show, he admitted that the Irish Sea border was still in existence. This, and Suzanne has just alluded to it, this is a big challenge for the DUP, because they are going to have to try to ride two horses over the next 5 weeks. They're on one hand going to have to try to gain as much of the middle ground as they can, particularly in urban areas, but at the same time be conscious that they raise voter turnout, particularly within Loyalist areas.
Yeah, so you were talking to Suzanne the other day, and you mentioned to her the need for the DUP to be positive and vibrant, as you put it, to appeal to the middle ground to counter the alliance party. So that's absolutely essential. Does this move, this reset, if that's what it is, by Gavin Robinson, help him to do that, or does it actually make it more difficult for him to do that?
Well, I think what it does is it provides a united front for the DUP over the next 5 weeks. They park their differences at least until this time, 5 weeks, and we see where the dust settles and what comes out of it. I think it may be enough short-term, tactically, to bring back the current number of seats. However, I think strategically, it's a further dent. And I think, to use a football analogy, it's almost like staying in the Premiership in the last game of the season. You breathe a sigh of relief, but ultimately, you've got to do it all over again.
Yeah, OK, you always like your football analogies, that's for sure. Davy Adams, I don't know if you're going to include football analogies or not,
No.
but what do you make of what Gavin Robinson's up to?
I agree with everything that's been said, Mark. To be perfectly honest, I would like some level of contrition for what caused all of the problems, and that is Brexit, which the DUP pursued against the democratically expressed wishes of the electorate here, and not only that, went for the hardest possible Brexit, and all of the problems that we're in now as a society stem from that, their actions. But I have to say as well that the DUP trying to sell itself to the middle ground is going to be a very, very hard sell. I mean,
So you've moved me very nicely onto what you're actually here to talk about, and that is that wider conversation about where unionism is in this society at the moment, never mind the fact that we're in the middle of an election campaign, and also where unionism should stand as far as the United Ireland conversation is concerned. You feel that it is a conversation worth engaging in.
Yeah.
Why do you believe that?
well, I was invited to go to Ireland's Future event in June because I had been critical of them. And fair play to them, they invited me along to voice my criticisms to them face to face. I also think it's not something unionism can hide from and pretend doesn't exist.
Some unionists think that it doesn't exist and they can hide from it.
Well, they can't, because the Good Friday Agreement makes it very, very clear that if the majority of people here or if the Secretary of State deems a majority of people here want to have a border poll, then a border poll will be held. And nothing can change that.
Yeah, but some unionists, of course, say that's the time that you start engaging in the conversation because you're actually fighting something that you can see. At the moment, you're actually playing into the hands of those individuals who want to advance this narrative.
How? How are you playing into their hands? By going and having a conversation with them and raising your objections?
By saying it's, they would say, by saying it's a credible conversation that needs to be had.
By raising your objections to elements of their campaign.
So you're absolutely clear. Just for the avoidance of doubt, you'll be going into that Ireland's Future event saying clearly, I'm a unionist and I don't want there to be a united Ireland.
No, I won't be saying that. What I'll be saying is what I've said publicly from the outset, and that is that I will make a judgment if I'm still around when there's a border poll based on where I think the best future for my children and grandchildren lies. Now, at the moment, with nothing being done, or more or less nothing being done on trying to advance reconciliation, I think it'll be a choice between the devil and the deep blue sea, but I'll make that choice.
Okay.
So there's nothing to say that I will vote to remain part of the United Kingdom or I will vote to become part of a new Ireland. I will judge that when the time comes, based solely on where I think the best future for my grandchildren and that generation and future generations lies.
And some people will say that is a remarkable thing to hear someone with your background within unionism and loyalism saying, let's remember, you were a member of the UDA for a time, you were an elected councillor for the Ulster Democratic Party. So you were involved in the negotiations from a loyalist perspective that led to the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. We'll come on to reconciliation in a moment or two, but I want just David Graham to pick up on that point. We had Wallace Thompson sitting in the seat that Davy Adams is in a number of weeks ago, talking about his view that constitutional change is inevitable. And he drew an awful lot of criticism on social media from fellow unionists who said that he shouldn't have said what he said on this programme and he shouldn't be engaging with Ireland's future. Is it reasonable for Wallace Thompson to say what he said and for Davy Adams to be saying what he's saying tonight? Should unionism have broad enough shoulders to be able to bear that?
Look, I think ultimately we live in a democracy and everyone has the right to their own free opinion, and certainly I respect Davy's opinion and I respect Wallace Thompson's opinion and what both of them have done for unionism and loyalism in the past. I think the danger is that we as unionists, in fact the people of Northern Ireland, slip into this narrative that someone like Professor Colin Harvey will basically say, look, United Ireland's happening, get used to it and start preparing for it.
But that's just one man's opinion.
No, of course, and I'm using him
just because Colin Harvey says that doesn't mean it's going to come to pass.
And of course,
with the greatest respect to Colin.
No, of course, but I think this is the danger where we as unionists need to be clear that it's not about saying it's not going to happen or accepting it's happening. It's about going out there and selling the union on a day and daily basis. And I think the challenge that we have as unionists at the minute, party political unionism is in a sorry state. It's probably in disarray and in many ways is almost in the weakest position that it's been in since 1921. However, I feel that if there's a border poll called in the morning, I'm confident that a lot of those people who vote for the likes of the Alliance Party, in fact, and I've said this to Claire Hanna, people like Claire Hanna in South Belfast, in the privacy of the ballot box, they may still want to remain and keep the status quo. But if the judgment is made upon, as some of the things Davy has outlined, on voting to remain part of the UK, that is not a sure footing, and unionism is building its house on sand.
Yeah, okay. Let's move on to the subject of reconciliation. Davy, you've already raised it. You're of the view, as I understand it, that reconciliation needs to happen before there could be reunification. Now, there are those who are involved in Ireland's Future who say that you got to have, and we've heard from them on this programme, you've got to have reunification first and reconciliation will come as part of that process. But you can't sit waiting for reconciliation before you move on reunification.
That's not what I'm saying at all.
Okay, just let's be absolutely clear what you are saying.
What I'm saying is a sustained and serious effort at reconciliation has to begin here. It's a joke when we look at it. I mean, we really haven't. We banked everything from the Good Friday Agreement that we liked and farmed out and then ignored the bits that we didn't want to do, and we certainly didn't engage in reconciliation. I mean, reconciliation has no end point. It continues onward, so there's no such thing as saying reconciliation has to take place. Reconciliation has to be pursued between now and a border poll.
But does there need to be a resolution as far as reconciliation is concerned? Does there have to be some kind of agreement before you could move on constitutional change? Because people who are behind Ireland's future believe that you have reunification first and reconciliation will follow. Will you take your different emphasis into that meeting that's taking place in a few weeks' time?
Oh, of course. And they know that, and fair play to them. They've invited me on that basis that I am critical of their views on that and on other things.
And you won't pull any punches as far as that's concerned?
No. Let's take a look back at, let's just imagine how many times in the past in Irish history, during a calm period, people must have become complacent and said, well, that could never again, referring to the last round of butchery. And they were always wrong, because underlying problems weren't addressed, and following that, reconciliation was not advanced. We have, to a large extent, addressed the underlying problems here, but reconciliation, to my mind, has not in any meaningful sense been advanced at all.
Okay, here's the point. There are nationalists, Republicans, who believe that Unionists will use for their own purposes the notion of reconciliation to simply deliver endless delay, to put off the day they don't want to see, and that is the day of constitutional change.
But unionism cannot afford to do that, can no longer afford to do that, because the majority of it still is there, is very, very slim. And there's a middle ground out there that David alluded to, which isn't only Alliance supporters, it's also people who long ago lost faith in what passes for politics here, but come out to vote whenever it's an important issue, such as Brexit to a lesser extent, the Good Friday Agreement very much so, and will come out to vote on a border poll. And if they think for 1 second that the fault lies with unionism for reconciliation not being advanced, they'll not vote for what unionism wants them to vote for.
Okay, which brings us back to your point that you've made, David, about the centre ground and the need for unionism, as you see it, to appeal to the centre ground for reasons that you've already explained. Where do you stand on the issue of reconciliation? I mean, you're clearly going to be uncomfortable with the idea of constitutional change before reconciliation, but would you seek to use reconciliation as a way to delay what some people see as the inevitability of that change?
Look, I think, Mark, one of my main concerns with a united Ireland, a new Ireland, or whatever we would interpret it as, is what my place within it would be, and people like me. So for me, there's a lot of work to be done by Ireland's future to convince anyone across Northern Ireland.
Okay. Well, it's an interesting expression of views. A bit of agreement, bit of disagreement. The event is happening anyway, and you're taking part in it. No doubt we'll hear about your experiences in due course. We need to leave it there, folks. Thanks both very much indeed. That's it for tonight. The leaders' interviews continue next Thursday, when I'll be joined by the Ulster Unionist leader Doug Beattie and the TUV's Jim Allister. Just a quick reminder that a full list of candidates standing in the election will be published on the BBC News NI website when nominations close next Friday. And our Red Lines constituency profile podcasts are now up and running. We're looking at Northdown, Southdown and Strangford on this week's episode, and that's available on BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts. Sunday Politics is here at the slightly later time of 11 o'clock on BBC One. But for now, from all of us, thanks for watching. Good night.